Many people like to joke that the English and the French are eternal enemies. Perhaps that is an exaggeration, but history tells a different story. Between these two kingdoms, peace never truly lasted. Long before the modern age, when Europe was still locked in the shadows of the Middle Ages, the hatred between England and France was forged in blood, steel, and the ambitions of royal dynasties. The conflict was never just about a throne. It reshaped feudal society and gave birth to the earliest ideas of national identity, and forever changed the way wars were fought. History gave this conflict a simple name: the 100 Years' War. The war officially began in 1337, but its roots stretched back centuries earlier. In 1066, William of Normandy crossed the Channel and conquered England. Though a vassal of the French king, William crowned himself King of England. From that moment on, a dangerous paradox was born. The King of England remained, in name, a subject of the French crown. By the time of the Plantagenets, England controlled more than half of France. To the kings of France, this was an insult that could not be tolerated. In 1328, King Charles IV of France died without a male heir. Edward III of England claimed the throne through his French lineage. The French nobility refused. They placed Philippe VI of the House of Valois on the throne. Tensions soon focused on Gascony, a region rich in wine, salt, and trade. On May 24, 1337, French forces seized Gascony. Edward III responded with an unprecedented declaration. He proclaimed himself the rightful king of France. The declaration ignited a war that would last more than a century. Despite being outnumbered, England would repeatedly defy expectation. Population, wealth, and prestige favored France. Yet numbers alone would not decide this war. The first decisive blow came not on land, but at sea. At Sluys in 1340, Edward III annihilated the French fleet. England now controlled the Channel. From then on, the war would be fought on French soil. French towns braced for siege. In 1346, the armies met at Crécy. Edward III deployed the longbow with devastating effect. The sky turned black with arrows. French knights charged, bound by tradition and honor. Armor and lineage offered no protection. Thousands of French nobles lay dead. The English lost only a few hundred men. Then came the Black Death. Both sides were forced to pause. When the war resumed, England struck again. At Poitiers in 1356, the stakes were even higher. This time, the King of France himself would be captured. At Poitiers, discipline once again defeated numbers. King Jean II of France was taken alive. Never before had a French king been captured on the battlefield. France plunged into crisis. Without its king, the kingdom fractured. In 1360, the Treaty of Bretigny was signed. England gained vast territories in southwestern France. In return, Edward III set aside his claim to the French crown. But the war was far from over. England now stood at the height of its power. Though vastly outnumbered, English forces fought with cohesion and discipline. Control of the sea ensured control of the war. French lands now bore the cost of war. For a moment, it seemed England could not be stopped. But dominance would not last forever. France was already preparing its response. The war was changing, and France was learning how to fight back. French resistance did not begin with a grand battle. It began with a change in leadership. Charles V understood that France could not defeat England head-on. Instead, he chose a war of endurance. Supply lines were harassed, convoys vanished, battles were avoided. The English found themselves stretched and isolated. Every mile forward cost more than the last. French strongholds remained untouched. Charles V entrusted the fighting to a different kind of commander. Bertrand du Guesclin avoided heroic charges. Instead, he struck where the English were weakest. Losses mounted quietly. English victories began to feel hollow. One by one, French cities returned to French hands. The war's balance was shifting. England's early advantage was slipping away. France had learned how to survive, and soon it would strike back. The turning point came at sea once again. English fleets supplied their armies across the Channel. France found allies in Castile. At La Rochelle in 1372, the English fleet was destroyed. England lost control of the sea. English positions were cut off and isolated. French forces advanced steadily. One stronghold after another fell. By 1374, England held little beyond Calais. The era of English dominance had ended. Both kingdoms were exhausted. Their greatest kings were gone. Younger rulers inherited a fragile peace. In 1389, an uneasy truce was declared. But the peace was fragile. Storms were already forming again. A new generation was coming to power, and with them, old ambitions returned. The war was about to begin again. In 1415, Henry V carried the war back to France. He demanded recognition as rightful king of France. When France refused, he prepared for war. Once again, the Channel became England's bridge to war. Henry's first target was the port of Harfleur. The siege dragged on longer than expected. Disease spread through the camp. Harfleur finally fell, but victory came at a heavy price. Henry chose to march toward Calais. English columns snaked across open land. They were outnumbered several times over. Victory seemed inevitable. Nature would choose the battlefield. The English were exhausted and hungry, yet Henry refused to retreat. Instead, he prepared his men. The stage was set. The French believed the day already won. They were wrong. At Agincourt, silence weighed heavier than armor. The English waited. The French grew impatient. When they advanced, the ground betrayed them. Then the arrows came. The sky darkened. Armor became a prison. The narrow field became a killing ground. The English closed in. Many never rose again. The French army collapsed. Against all expectation, England prevailed. Thousands of French nobles were killed or captured. English losses were minimal by comparison. The flower of French chivalry lay broken. Agincourt reshaped the war. Henry V emerged as a legend, but the cost of war endured. The echoes would last for generations. Yet the war was far from finished. After Agincourt, the balance of power shifted once more. France was divided against itself. King Charles VI was no longer able to rule. The Burgundians chose alliance over loyalty. England found a powerful ally. By 1420, Paris lay under English control. The Treaty of Troyes reshaped the kingdom. Henry was named heir to the French throne. He married Catherine of Valois. For a moment, England stood at the peak of its power. Then, without warning, Henry fell ill. He died in 1422, before his victory could be secured. His son was only an infant. England mourned its king. Henry VI inherited 2 crowns, but the foundations were already cracking. Not all of France accepted the treaty. Charles VII refused to yield his claim. 2 kings now claimed 1 crown. The war would enter its final and most desperate phase. As France stood on the brink of collapse, hope came from the most unlikely place. She was a peasant girl, barely 17 years old. She claimed to hear voices sent by God. France had lost confidence in itself. Against all reason, she sought an audience with the Dauphin. Charles VII did not believe her at first, yet something in her words moved him. Orléans was France's last hope. She carried no military rank, yet her presence changed everything. The French attacked. She did not fight with a sword. Orléans was lifted. The momentum did not stop. At Poitiers, the English were caught unprepared. The spell of English invincibility was broken. The road to Reims lay open. In 1429, Charles VII was crowned King of France. Her mission, she believed, was complete. France had found itself again. But her story was not yet finished. The struggle would demand more sacrifice. Soon, Jeanne would face her greatest trial. She returned to the battlefield once more. The battle turned quickly. She was captured. France could not save her. But the fire she lit would not go out. The war would demand one final reckoning. Jeanne was taken to Rouen, far from the fields she had inspired. Her trial was political, not spiritual. She faced her judges without fear. The verdict had been decided before the questions were asked. She refused to recant. Her sentence was death. On May 30th, 1431, she was executed. France lost its voice. But her death did not end her influence. Charles VII transformed grief into reform. France built a standing army and invested heavily in artillery. One by one, English strongholds fell. Walls that once stood for centuries crumbled. England could no longer hold France. By mid-century, the war was decided. France emerged transformed. England turned inward. 2 nations had been remade by war. The 100 Years' War had come to an end. By 1453, the war had narrowed to its final battleground. France prepared a new kind of battlefield. Discipline replaced chivalry. England sent one last army. John Talbot embodied the old war. The ground itself had been reshaped. The cannons spoke first. There was no charge to meet. The old ways offered no answer. Talbot charged into the storm. He was killed at Castillon. England's last hope collapsed. The 100 Years' War ended not with a treaty, but with silence. France emerged victorious, but forever changed. A centralized French state had been forged. England retained only Calais. England turned toward civil war. Both kingdoms emerged profoundly changed. From the ashes of war, the modern world would emerge. The 100 Years' War had finally ended. When the war ended, Europe did not return to what it had been. France emerged more centralized than ever before. A permanent state apparatus replaced feudal improvisation. France now maintained a standing army. Gunpowder had permanently altered warfare. A sense of French identity had taken root. England emerged weakened and divided. Civil war would soon follow. The dead were remembered in silence. Jeanne d'Arc became a symbol beyond her life. The war reshaped Europe's balance of power. Castles no longer guaranteed safety. Life slowly resumed. Commerce and cities recovered. History sought to make sense of the conflict. France would emerge as a dominant European power. England would descend into decades of internal strife. The Channel remained, but the world had changed. The 100 Years' War became history, but its legacy still shapes the modern world. Centuries passed, but the memory endured. Battlefields became ruins, then memories. Chroniclers shaped how the war would be remembered. Facts blended with legend. Sacred spaces preserved collective memory. Jeanne became a mirror for every generation. Each age rewrote the past to suit its needs. Monuments fixed stories in stone. The war entered textbooks. The land forgot, even if people did not. The war's lessons echoed far beyond France and England. Even historians continue to argue its meaning. Jeanne's image shifted, but never disappeared. War became background to peace, yet the past never fully fades. Memory shapes identity. The 100 Years' War never truly ended. Its echoes cross borders and centuries. Understanding the past remains unfinished. History does not end. It waits to be questioned. Wars end, but their shadows remain. Paths once taken are never truly erased. Time buries the tools of violence. Life insists on returning. Enemies shaped one another. The past remains embedded in the present. Every generation reopens the record. Some stories are carved in stone, others remain open to debate. The future built upon the past. Peace is not the absence of memory, it is the understanding of it. History flows, indifferent to judgment, but people choose what to remember and how to tell the story. The 100 Years' War is over. Its meaning remains contested, as all history does, waiting to be understood. After the story ends, questions remain. History does not conclude. It pauses.